So, we're talking about the cumulative effect of workplace trauma, the consequences of chronic stress. And I know every single person can relate to this topic because I know all of you, and you've all been through the mill in terms of the consequences of the chronic stress that you've experienced in the workplace. So, just for some as a review, and for others, this may be new, what it looks like. I thought this graphic of the stress level high, medium, and low for those of you working in hospital environments or big box clinics, institutions, the stress level is always at high, right? But what it looks like is first and foremost, too much work. I'm sure that if I could see your faces in this moment and ask for a show of hands, everyone would agree that that's the number one issue, too much work. Secondly, ineffective communication. So here you are with too much work. There are breakdowns in communication. And what ends up happening as a result of too much work and breakdowns in communication or ineffective communication? The expectations are unrealistic. Not only are you dealing then with too much work, poor communication, unrealistic expectations, but then you throw into the mix workplace politics. There isn't a medical institution that isn't filled with workplace politics. Then you have the medical and vicarious trauma that you experience day in and day out dealing with tragic situations. Everybody initially got into medicine because you wanted to be of service, you wanted to be in the sciences, you wanted to make a difference. And then you find yourself daily or weekly or monthly traumatized by what you experience in the workplace. And then finally, you have responsibility that often isn't commensurate with the authority you're given. I hear over and over again about people who are given the impression that you have lots of responsibility. So you roll up your sleeves and you start to get ready to really take everything on, and you find out you don't have the authority that you need in order to carry forth the responsibility you've been given. Maddening. So how this feels, it feels like stress. And I thought this graphic was good because it lists all the things that we experience as a result of this level of stress: divorce, fatigue, pressure, relocation, family and stress with children. Sometimes it results in headaches or migraines or really poor health, even death sometimes when people stroke out or have a heart attack. Often it includes new employers, new bosses, sick days, fatigue. The list just goes on. And how that feels is exhausting. It's confusing because you're supposed to be doing what you love to do, what you're trained to do, and instead you're so inundated by stress that you're barely functioning. It's disempowering and you feel powerless. Often it's isolating. And if you aren't isolated, you develop trauma bonds with coworkers. Trauma bonds are a great way of getting through a traumatic situation, but trauma bonds are not healthy relationships that you can trust on going forth into the future. It can make you sick. It produces anxiety, and it's frustrating. And frustrating is sort of a watered down adjective for anger. You know, it can be enraging. It can be angering. It's incredibly difficult to feel the level of stress that happens when you are in a work situation that's toxic. So what can you do? Everybody wants to gain control and figure out how to get to the next exit. First and foremost, and this recording will be shared with all of you so you can go back and review this list, but identify all the stressors in this highly stressful work environment. Make a list. Once you've made the list, define what your limits and limitations are, because you can't set boundaries if you haven't identified your limits. So write it down, say it out loud, really be clear about what your limits are. And then once you have identified your limits, the next challenge is to be boundaried. A good way to be boundaried is to create scripted responses and strategies so that you're prepared. It's often when we're unprepared and gaslighted or blindsided that we feel helpless in the situation, and we find ourselves nodding yes instead of shaking our heads no. Get support, and that's part of what this group is about. But I also want to encourage you to get support even beyond this group so that you feel like you can do something, that you're in charge. Find pressure release activities. You can't hold it all in. If you want to gain control, you have to find a way to release the stress, pressure, and trauma that you've experienced. Take care of yourself, which means really tuning in, asking yourself what you need and want, and spending some time making that happen. Make small changes daily. That's one of the most important things. It's not about the big changes. It's not about, getting a new job or suing your boss. It's about making those small changes daily that begin to exert some influence in the workplace and change things so that you're taken seriously, so that you can speak truth to power, so that you feel like you're back in charge. And then once you've done those things, it's time to recover. And how you recover is by taking some time off, resting. Hugely important. I don't know how many times I hear that I haven't taken a vacation in years, or I haven't really taken a vacation. My vacation was when my dad got sick and I had to go home on FMLA. Or my time off was when I broke my leg and I took a few days off from work, or when I had a baby. That's not really taking time off to rest. That's, again, more trauma, more stress, more obligations and responsibilities. Play and be creative. Return to former activities and hobbies and things that you used to enjoy, even if you can't imagine doing it today and feel like you're just the shadow of yourself that you were yesteryear. Spend some time creating a plan that involves play and creativity of some type. Spend time dreaming. That's a really, really important piece, because when we're overwhelmed, we often just get into functioning and surviving. And in that mode, there's no space for dreaming. Dreaming is the only way you're going to find a way out of the stressful, toxic place you find yourself. Fill yourself up with activities that energize you and uplift you, whether that's, retail therapy, whether that is being in nature, soaking in a hot tub, drawing, painting, reading, getting out that cello and playing it again. Fill yourself up. Create an action plan. That's a part of recovery. And sometimes an action plan is like a vision board or journal that maps out some of what you want to do with your life once you have experienced full recovery. And then finally, once again, I just had to hammer it home one more time, make small changes daily. That's the most effective way to begin to really feel like you're making changes in your life, is to just, even if those small changes are things like taking a lunch, taking a break at work, setting limits around the hours you're working on specific days. It doesn't have to be
all or nothing.